Hi, welcome back to the channel. I want to do something a little different today. It's sort of a review slash, I guess, rant, if you will. Hopefully not too ranty. But a friend of mine sent me a link to a video, a documentary called Out of Shadows. It's on YouTube. It's probably on other video platform sites. And it's really interesting. It's Out of Shadows. It's about an hour long. I think it's an hour and 15. It's kind of starts off in one thing and goes off in a whole other direction. So it's mainly produced by this guy who's been a stuntman in Hollywood for a long time. I think he's also become a director, and he's uh, talking about how he realized over time how much Hollywood in particular, but I think media in general, has had how much of an influence these things have had on the American society and our individual psyches as well. And it kind of gets into something a lot of people have talked about for a long time is that very few companies own almost everything. I think we're now down to six. When I was younger, when I was in college, it was like 40. And the number just keeps shrinking and shrinking. Recently was a Disney bought out Fox. So it just kind of keeps on getting smaller and smaller to the point of like pretty much everything that you watch, every movie, every TV show, the music you listen to, the video games that you play, the books you well, no, maybe not necessarily the books you read, but certainly the magazines that you read, a lot of the websites that you go to. All of these are owned by basically six companies. If you just follow the line of who owns who owns who owns who owns who, then yeah, you trace it all the way back. You know, Disney is one of the big ones. I think Comcast is one of the other big ones, although maybe Comcast is owned by somebody else. Not really sure. Like I said, it keeps shifting and changing. And the documentary goes off on other tangents. You know, they kind of talk about how did we get here, that so many of these broadcasting companies started out associated with the media. That was something new. I did not know that a lot of the founders of like CBS and NBC were were either military themselves or were working very closely with the military. And I think they made a good point. Like a lot of these communications originally start off as ways of getting messages to ships and airplanes. Because that would be the groups that would need the largest, most powerful antenna and systems in place. And so then it was easy for them just to take that and shift that over to a domestic front as well. And I did know that a lot of them start off as radio. I think CBS was originally a radio broadcasting company. Actually, maybe NBC as well. Um, he also talks about how closely like Walt Disney has been with the with the military and the CIA and all that sort of stuff. And then he kind of gets into like Operation Paperclip, where we pulled over a lot of Nazis from after World War II, a lot of Nazi scientists. We kind of cleaned up their records so you didn't necessarily know about maybe some war crimes they had committed. Turned them into upstanding citizens. He gets into MK Ultra with a lot of the mind control, and to be honest, he kind of goes off into a lot of tangents that I really don't want to get off into. I'm familiar with all of these concepts. To be honest, if you've been paying attention to the quote unquote weird side of the internet, any kind of like conspiracy theory type things, which he was invented by the CIA to discredit people, you're probably not going to hear anything really new. I think what it is that it's presented in a very sort of high production value kind of way. This is a guy who makes movies for a living, so it looks a lot better than a guy with a webcam in his office. It looks a lot nicer. He interviews a lot of other people, and it's probably presented in a way that for a lot of people who haven't been paying attention will finally pay attention to this. They'll probably get into this, and it's very timely too because he's talking about Jeffrey Epstein and his island and the Lolita Express, and it was just like I think last week maybe 2 weeks ago, that his partner Giselle Maxwell, I think is her how you pronounce her name. She was just arrested, so that's not over with yet. So that will be very interesting. But anytime I watch a video like this, I always try and bring back to what can I do. When I was very young, younger when I was in high school, maybe middle school, I'd watch videos that disturbed me in some ways. A lot, especially about environmentalism, because that was a much bigger deal back then. We're talking about the '80s, and we were the Clean Air and Clean Water Act were still like up for debate, and anti-littering campaigns and all that stuff, energy conservation, and those sort of things. And I'd watch a lot of like kind of movies that or documentaries that bothered me, and it's because the issues oftentimes just feel so big, and if that's my one complaint about this one video is it still feels really big, and then it's over. It doesn't really end with, well, here's what you can do. And so I guess in a way that's what I want this video to be, is my message to you of what you can do. Now, when we talk about things like Jeffrey Epstein or Luciferian cults or anything else like that, those are really big and beyond us. With the Jeffrey Epstein thing, I think the best thing we can do is to keep that message alive. That's why I love the memes about Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. I'll just every once in a while I'll come across a random comment somewhere where it'll just say, here's your weekly reminder that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. I think that's good, because that keeps the issue in the forefront. It's still out there. People are still talking about it. People are still kind of joking about it, which I think is fine. It's a serious topic, but it's fine to kind of, because if you keep it humorous, then people want to keep talking about it. People don't like downers. But on the notion of like the media, that was something that I kind of really got me interested. This is a little bit of a tangent, but as I started becoming more of a writer, when I started writing a lot more and started producing stuff, I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos of other writers and in the AuthorTube world, and I think someone made a video, maybe it was ML Ron, I can't remember, but he talked about like ways that your life will change once you become a writer. And I don't remember all of it, but one that stuck out to me, because it definitely happened to me, is you just stop mindlessly consuming entertainment. You just stop. Partly it's just a time factor. If you want to write, then that just takes time. If you want to create anything, that takes time. If you want to be a painter, you want to be a writer, you want to be a sculptor, you want to sew clothes, you want to be a carpenter or woodworker, you want to do anything sort of creative. Creation itself takes time and energy. And once you find that mode of creating that really tickles your pickle, so to speak, you are fine with giving up that time and energy, because you actually get a lot back. You don't get your time back, but you definitely get recharged, get your energy back in a very different kind of way. And so suddenly not watching TV is okay. I did not care. Everyone was talking about The Mandalorian, how great it was. I didn't see it until like a few weeks ago, because I was like, I'll get Disney Plus. Well, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite on that one. I'll get Disney Plus. I think I wrapped it in with Hulu, because I just wanted to like watch some shows on Hulu. And so I finally watched The Mandalorian. It was pretty good. Not life-changing. I probably won't watch season 2. Even the movies that I watch, I tend to be a lot more picky about what I want to watch. The idea of just turning something on and just having it play in the background just doesn't appeal to me anymore. Unless it's music. Maybe some documentaries, if you will. Sorry, I'm trying to not sneeze. But after a while, you just stop being interested in that stuff. And I think one of the things that you can do to counteract the major influence that these companies have, these media companies have, is just stop consuming their stuff. Just think of it as like junk food. If you ate donuts all day, every day, you'd get sick and you'd feel it. you'd show it, you'd be massively overweight, and you just feel bad, and it'd be very easy for people to point out, go, just quit eating those damn donuts, man. And in many ways, that's how our media is today. Um, our news is not interested in informing you; it's about influencing you at every level. There used to be like a few channels that I could point to and go, well, NPR is fairly neutral, or those websites, they're fairly neutral. Not anymore. They're all trying to influence you in some way, in some direction. And also, just the very nature of most media itself is influence. They want to sell you something. They're not selling you the news. They're selling you the commercials. The news is the thing that they hook you in with to get eyeballs on your screen, so then they can stick out a commercial for Progressive or for some new Tide soap or a car or whatever. That's actually what they're selling, because that's how they make their money. They don't make their money by telling you about the news. They make their money by having other people sell them or buy their ad space in between little sections that they sell you the news. So their little influence is all about getting your ass in the seat and watching their screen and not changing the channel. And one of the best ways to do that is with fear. The human mind, this is a whole nother video, maybe I'll make that another time, but the human brain responds to fear more strongly than any other emotion, because that's our survival. Our ancestors who weren't afraid died. They weren't that concerned about lions, and the lions ate them, and they didn't pass on their genes, and that's it. We are the descendants of the people who were a little paranoid, who kind of kept watching the bushes the whole time we're getting a drink of water. We always knew exactly how far away the next tree was, so we could get up there really quick if something kind of tried to get us. We were the ones who stayed away from anyone who seemed sick, because we don't want to get sick as well. That sort of constant fear and paranoia is what kept our ancestors alive, and then their children and their children and their children down to you. And we know this. We figured this out. We figured this out maybe 100 years ago, that humans respond to fear more strongly than anything else. And major media companies, politicians, world leaders, you name it, religious leaders, they have used fear to make sure that people are hooked to whatever their message is. And it's really hard to just avoid that. Because I'm aware of what's going on, and I will still get caught up in the fear and the anger of what people are peddling, because they're really good at it, and our brains are constantly looking for that as well. And so really the best way to beat this is just stop consuming. One, don't consume any kind of entertainment at all. More on that in a moment. But two, really limit your news intake, because the news is like the worst as far as like ramming fear down your throat. What I usually tell my clients is to consume the news the same way that we did when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there was no cable news. That didn't really come until I was like in middle school. When I was younger, we got the 5 o'clock local evening news, the 5:30 national news, and then the 6 o'clock local news. And I think like again, there's like 10 or 11 o'clock, there was the evening news. I was usually in bed by then. And then that was it. And then it was newspapers. You'd buy a newspaper and you'd read through that. Actually, there's news on the radio as well, but it wasn't like talk radio like we have today, where it's just like a whole channels of nothing but one news pundit after another talking about what's going on in the current events. And so by doing that, by consuming the news in bite-sized chunks, you are limiting the impact that has. I guess because we're living in an internet age, have that one blog that you follow, that one or two blogs that seem to be fairly independent, that maybe are a little more honest in their reporting. Wish I could make some recommendations on that, but find one or two that you seem to trust and like, that maybe even just deal with concepts, the topics that you're most interested in, and then just kind of follow those. And only check in with like that maybe once or twice a day. Don't let them text you alerts. Don't let them send you notifications or anything else like that, because they will do that all throughout the day to dominate your thinking. And so that's being careful. But going back to the entertainment thing, um, really since I've been a kid, maybe even since my parents were kids, Americans have consumed entertainment in a way that's not really natural. Throughout most of human history, we didn't have electricity. So that right there meant we didn't have TVs, we didn't have radios, we didn't have internet, we didn't have any of that stuff. Um, and so for the most part, people woke up when the sun came up and they went to bed when the sun went down. They might hang out a little bit afterwards. Some thoughts were that the earliest forms of culture and entertainment probably start around the campfire as we're trying to cook our food in the evenings. Sit there and tell stories about the stuff that happened to us during the day, how we caught the big fish, or the scary interaction we had with the lion, or how the water, the river and the waters run a little low, or whatever. Telling these sort of stories back and forth. And of course telling stories about the stars, and if you ate some of the funny mushrooms, maybe some of the stuff that you saw, voices you've been hearing, whatever. And that continued on really for thousands of years, maybe until, I'd have to say, until like the 1920s, when radio became a lot more common. Up until then, if you heard music, it's because someone was over there playing it. And it might be you. You might be in that band as well. If you heard a story, it's because someone was standing there telling you. You watched a play. These were interactions that people had directly with other people. And some of these instances were very rare. Many people probably went their whole lives without ever seeing a play, or maybe even just seeing a handful of them. Everybody learned how to play a musical instrument or knew someone who did. And so hanging out and just singing and telling stories and telling jokes and that sort of stuff, these were immediate interactions done between people that really anyone could have engaged in at any time. If someone's singing a song, then you can sing along with them and join right on in. And it's probably you and your friends and your neighbors and maybe some visitors or something else like that. But it was very immediate, very personal, very communal in that sense. Today, and really more so since the advent of radio a little bit, because early radio was like TV. They didn't just play music. They played. They also gave you the news. They also had the radio programs, were like the Lone Ranger and the Shadow and Little Annie Oakley and a lot of other TV shows that sometimes or radio shows that turned into TV shows, and in some cases turned into movies later on. They started at that point, but then it really took off with TV, and that's when people just parked themselves in front of a television and just watched. And they stopped reading, and they stopped talking to each other, and they stopped telling each other stories. It wasn't as bad back then, because we know in the 1950s we also had amazing science fiction writers in the 60s as well, again in the Twilight Zone, and so people were really concerned about how disengaged people were getting. But it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point that we're at the internet revolution where, with streaming TV and a billion channels of nothing to watch, people will sit down and just mindlessly consume whatever's on the little screen in front of them, and they don't really think. They don't really create. The human mind is a creative organ. That's how we survived. We are not fast. We are not strong. We can't fly. We can't really swim. We don't even hide very well. We got weak little fingers and flat teeth, but we survived because we have a very logical and creative mind that could create tools and solutions to all those things that we weren't really good at. We're not fast. Fine, I invent a bow and arrow. I'm not very strong. That's okay. I create a spear. I don't have a lot of fur to keep me warm. I make a house. That's humans. That's how we survive. And really, for the past at least half century, but going further back than that, we've just turned off our creative minds. And I still think that's the way to push back on these six companies that control everything that we see and read and that sort of thing, is create your own stuff. Go back to creating again. If you're watching this on a computer, even if it's on your phone, that computer has some sort of word processing program. That means you can write. At least do that. Buy some cheap paints from Hobby Lobby and paint something. Sculpt. Take wood carving. Don't care. Create something that really gets your mind going. Especially something that is image based or story based, because that's really what our movies and our TV are shoving down our throat. Flashy images and some stories, and that's about it. You create your own stories, you don't need their stories. You create your own pretty images, you don't need their images. And so it starts to push back on it. And of course, I forgot about the music thing. Start making your own music. Learn how to play a musical instrument. Don't care what. I'm actually thinking about just buying some drumsticks and just kind of whapping on my couch at home or something. Maybe if I like it enough, I'll actually buy a little old drum thing or something else like that. But the more you create for yourself, the more you use your own mind, the stronger your brain gets, and the more you can see through all these little lies and manipulations that this documentary was kind of talking about, at least in the beginning. As an independent writer, as someone who's really just getting started, I've only been doing this maybe a year, not quite a year and a half now. I can tell you it's what's really turned a lot of my life around. My depression, anxiety has pretty much disappeared when I find myself getting caught up, laying in bed and I'm worried about the work I've got to do, or am I going to have enough clients, or what's going on with the pandemic, or whatever. I just flip my mind to start thinking about whatever story I'm working on, and thinking about those characters, where I want it to go, and that, more than anything else, more than any antidepressant I've ever taken, more than any even meditation I've ever done, that really helps, because it lets my mind go someplace that's under my control, and that benefits me, and that exercises that creative mind, that instead of creating a reality that I don't want to live in, it helps me create a reality that is at least a lot more interesting. If you've read Saga of the Scout, that's not really a reality you want to live in. But, you kind of get the idea, I think. So anyway, I guess the sum it all up is to just say, just go out and create something, anything. And don't worry about if it's any good or not. Don't worry about what someone else is going to think. Don't even worry about what you're going to do with it. For now, just create. And once you start creating, then maybe you want to get into how to sell it, or post it someplace, or do something. But in the beginning, just make something. Make something that is of value to you. If nobody else, it's valuable to you. And in the end, that's the only audience that really matters. But anyway, I will talk to you next week. We're going to be going back into the Enneagram, and I will see you then. Bye.